Today's guest is Eric Milano. He's from MotoVermont, which is a touring company based in Burlington, Vermont. They now give tours across the U.S. Eric talks to us today about what it's like to be on a tour, the experience of it, and where some of these tours go. If you've ever been interested in doing a motorcycle tour, there's a lot of great information in this episode. Hello, my beautiful motorheads. Welcome to Feroz, where we inspire you to live fiercely. I'm your host, Anit Magak, and let's get into it. Eric, what made you decide to start a touring company?
Well, long story, as most stories are. I worked for a company that was doing a lot of traveling, totally unmotorcycle related. But when I would do travel, I would try and bookend it with a couple of free days so I could rent a motorcycle and explore that region, whether it be, stateside or overseas. I was living in Burlington, Vermont at the time, still am, and I really loved that area. And I found that when people would come visit me, there was nowhere to rent a motorcycle and explore that region. So just as a side gig, I bought a couple of GS style bikes and started renting them, and just really to have that option for people visiting Vermont, and also just to promote Vermont. I just always thought it was super beautiful and wanted to have that option for people.
You are an absolutely gorgeous part of the United States. Burlington area is just beautiful. When you decided to do this, was it like a side gig that then evolved into a business?
It was, yes. It was very much a side gig. I pretty much worked out of a storage unit for the first couple of years, and we had a fleet of 2 our first season. We upped that to a fleet of 4 our second season, and it grew from there.
When you first started and you were doing these smaller groups, like at this point, how has the business evolved? What does your fleet look like now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we were concentrating primarily on BMWs. We thought, I figured that was a great kind of all-purpose bike, and we were really promoting touring, mostly on-road touring, and people would come in from all over the world and do these kind of self-guided tours that would start in Vermont, go through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, along the coast of Maine, and then, loop back into Vermont. And since then, we have graduated to more adventure tours, so more off-pavement stuff. And with that, our fleet has definitely changed a lot. We don't carry any BMWs anymore. We've got a fleet of Yamaha Teneres, we've got KLX 300s, CRF 300s, and XT 250s. And that's primarily our fleet right now.
So people can rent a bike and do this. They don't have to, or can they also bring their own bikes?
Yeah, most people bring their own bikes, actually. For most of our tours and trainings, people are supplying their own bikes, and then we have the option to rent them a bike as well, either beforehand, or if they have some difficulty with their bike on the tour or in the training, we've got bikes available for them.
Okay. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the trainings, because I think that what's unique about your touring company is that it's not just specifically touring and seeing these different areas, but you offer these trainings.
Yeah. We found that that's a really important part of the business. We found that people would show up to these tours and sometimes lack basic skills and basic training. And some people already had that basic training, but would like to build upon that. And we found that offering those trainings, both ourselves teaching them and also hiring outside instructors that specialize in specific types of training, that's just been great for our customers. It's just given them so many more options to take more tours with us, take tours and ride all over the world. It's really cool. It's really cool to see people come into a training without that background and then leave 2 or 3 days later with this like incredible set of skills, and then use those skills to go out there and really explore the world.
That's very cool. So when you do the trainings, is it in the beginning of a trip, or are they kind of 2 different things?
Yeah, they're 2 different things, but we schedule the trainings throughout the season. So they start out in April or May, and then typically the last training is in October. So a lot of people do, they book a training and then they book a tour either right after or at the same time. And they just want the training to get ready for that tour. And they do, it doesn't have to be a tour with us necessarily. Sometimes they'll take, they've got a big trip in Pakistan or Nepal or something like that. And they come to us, get some basic training so they're prepared when they get over there. Because a lot of these, trips they're very remote, and to have the skill set, both riding skills and also safety skills, like having first aid knowledge and things like that, what to do in an emergency is invaluable.
Did you start off riding in dirt? Or, I mean, how much dirt experience did you have before you were doing these more adventure tours?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. I actually did not start riding until late in life. I started riding, didn't ride my first motorcycle until I was in college, and I didn't own my first motorcycle till I was about 22. And my first experience was in dirt, but my first motorcycle was an F650 GS. So it was mostly street with a little bit of
Hmm.
dirt, not much off road at that point. But as I got into it more, I just fell in love with off road and finding these places that few people could get to.
And would you say, having started a little bit later in life, I
Yeah,
mean, still relatively young, because what I'm finding now is that a
sure.
lot of people who listen to this podcast, that they actually have ridden as adults. And I think it's a much bigger contingent than maybe I was aware of before I started this. So I guess what I would ask is, like, you learned these skills and then you rode street and then you went back to doing, on-road, off-road. Do you find that the people that come to the tours, like what age range do they typically end up being?
The tours are typically, I'd say the average age is about 40 years old, maybe even 45. It's mostly people that
Okay.
have that free time to get out there and take a week off by themselves and then go on these rides. The trainings, however, are, I feel like, a younger demographic. So I'd say we've got, people just coming out of college, getting their license and wanting to get into the off-road riding, adventure riding segment. And then we've got a lot of
Hmm.
people that have been riding for years and now they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s and are a little tired of riding on road all the time. And really, they see these
Yeah.
BDRs popping up all over the place and all these guys geared out in their off-road kit on these GSs, and they want to be part of that.
Can you maybe explain a little bit what the BDR scene is like? Because I don't know that everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, sure. The BDR is it's a nonprofit organization that sets up these motorcycle riding routes all over the country. They've got a few here on the East Coast now. On the East Coast, they're multi-state routes, so they're usually over 1,000 miles, and they just they piece together really interesting roads. So they don't have to be dirt, although most of them are, but they are, little county roads that wind through beautiful little villages and valleys, cool dirt roads over mountains, basically the scenic, a little bit more out of the way route. And the routes that they put together are all free by GPX. They give them away for free on their website. And they also just promote us as adventure riders in all aspects. So a big fan of the BDR, really cool organization and very available to anybody and everybody that wants to get out there and off the pavement.
Do you think that with the rise of this interest in adventure touring in general, that it's been kind of pushing more people towards taking tours?
I would say it's pushing more people to just get out there and off of the main thoroughfares. It's
Okay.
the adventure rider movement, which you gotta credit Ewan and Charlie. They really pushed it big
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
in about 20 years ago
Yeah.
with the long way round. It's just encourages people that there's so much more out there than Route 66 or Pacific Coast Highway or US 1. Beautiful roads, very cool, interesting roads. But there's so many little
Mhm.
county roads and back roads that are just spectacular and no one's on them.
I agree with that. I think that sometimes it could be hard to find that information and to know that there's actually roads in your area. Most people
Yeah.
think that they just have to stay on pavement, and that if you try to go off on a dirt road, that maybe it's private property or, just, I don't know, some kind of like power line access road. But there actually is a lot that's available.
Yeah, there is. And you do a good point. You have to be really careful not to trespass on private property or government property and respect, other trail users, of course. But yeah, there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there right in people's backyards. And I think the Northeast BDR really exposed a lot of that to people in our area of the world where there is a lot of pavement.
So, one of the things that comes up when people talk about tours is that they get concerned about the different levels of riding for the people that show up. So how do you
Hmm.
accommodate, say, somebody who has like no experience and somebody who's very experienced but still wants to be in a tour atmosphere?
Yeah, good. We have different levels. I mean, at MotoVermont, we have different levels of tours. And what we do, if
Hmm.
somebody, every tour that you apply to sign up for, and that's how we do it. When somebody wants to do a tour, basically they send us a little like request, right? So they can't just be like, boom, I'm going to take that tour. They request it. We contact them with a questionnaire, a very, very specific questionnaire that asks them
Okay.
very specific questions and lets us decipher their riding skills. And if there's any question on our side, then we contact that customer and we, get more specific answers. And if it's not the right tour for them, we try and guide them to an appropriate level. And that might be our intro to adventure tour, which is a beginner training tour. That's how we kind of make sure everyone falls into the right level tour.
That sounds like a great way of going about it. I've also noticed that in following you over all these years that you have expanded where you're doing these tours now. Like you were only in the Burlington, Vermont area, kind of got a little bit bigger, but maybe you could talk about some of the new areas you guys are in.
Yeah.
And you're in a hotel, so you're obviously traveling right now.
I am. I'm actually in Boca Raton, Florida for family work. So don't get too excited. No South Florida motorcycle tours.
Okay. Very flat.
Very flat and very crowded. So we started out in the Vermont region and the Northeast, but pretty quickly we knew that we had to expand a little bit, both to get into different territories and also expand our weather season a little bit. So our first tour outside of that region was New Mexico. We started that about 6 or 7 years ago, and we basically made a 7-day loop out through southern New Mexico that is just absolutely beautiful and spectacular, and uses a few of the BDR routes, but mostly it's proprietary, and it does loop, so it comes back around, unlike a BDR, as most of the BDRs are just straight from one point to another. We developed that one, and that one has done really well for us. We've had a really good time leading New Mexico tours. After that, we wanted to develop something in the Southwest, so we came up with a Smoky Mountain 6-day route there that begins and ends in Asheville region, goes all the way into Tennessee, almost to the South Carolina border, and then back towards the Asheville area. Then we've done Arizona now. We had our first Arizona tour last year. That was really fun, really successful, very challenging. That's our most challenging tour. And what else? We've actually got a Big Bend tour as well that we haven't quite released yet. We're just waiting for the right time, but that's a fun one too, all around Western Texas. And that's only a 4 or 5 day loop, but also really interesting and unique. And notice that all of these tours are in kind of warmer climates. So we do them after our season in Vermont or for before our season.
What makes that Arizona trip so challenging in comparison to the other rides?
Yeah, Arizona is a wild place. First of all, everything on the trail in Arizona wants to hurt you. The plants, the rocks, the ledges. There's just the nature of this tour. There's lots of trail on it, more than dirt road or pavement of any of our other tours. The trails are rocky, they're sandy, there's some hill climbs, and they are unrelenting sometimes. Absolutely beautiful. Such a wide array of trails and roads out there. But yeah, you have to really work hard to get over some of those mountain passes and stuff. The cool thing is, or what we try and do to accommodate all levels of riding, because even if you have the skills, sometimes endurance can be an issue. We've got outs, we've got outs all the time. So, the guides are kind of trained to let the group know what's ahead of them. And if they're not up for it, then we've got an out to get them out to pavement or, maintain dirt road to get them to the hotel a little bit faster or whatever, something like that. We always have 2 guides on motorcycle on our tours. And then we also have a guide in a pickup truck. That pickup truck can't exactly, follow the group all the time, but it meets us at specific locations. So that's another out too. We can always, load your bike on the truck and get you out of there if need be.
That's great, because I think that can cause a lot of anxiety. The anticipation of like, oh, I want to go do this thing, but maybe I'm not going to be able to do. My levels aren't there, or, I think I'm better than I am. And then when I show up, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is really difficult. So that's good.
Yeah, that happens. People just have an off day. They get fatigued, day 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Those are tough days after riding so many days in a row. So there's always an out. You can always take a rest day and always take an early day. Options.
So on these tours, since you have a pickup truck, do people have to carry their own luggage and gear, or does that all go into the chase vehicle, which is called that, and arrive at the different hotels?
Yeah, that's right. So the chase vehicle carries extra bikes, extra tools, and gear for the customers.
That's key that you guys have extra bikes. That's actually really smart, because I'm sure you guys have had enough technical failures to think that through, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, we've seen it all as far as bikes, breaking down and people struggling with certain bikes. Sometimes it's not even a breakdown. Sometimes someone might bring something like a DR650, which is a great dual sport bike, but it's a large one. And, we've had people struggle on bikes such as that. And, we'll unload an XT250 for them and it'll be night and day. So
Yeah.
it could be for that reason as well.
I love that you guys have the XT250s. I personally own one, and I'm very thankful for the small size of it, which allows me to go do this type of riding. And I just love when I see you guys show these big guys on these XTs just owning it, because there's a major place for small bikes, and it's easy to just want to be on the biggest, baddest thing.
So much respect for that XT250. Those are the bikes that people have the least trouble with. We have the least mechanical difficulties with. And if you put the right rider on that bike, it's amazing what it can do. And I'll give you a quick example. One of our guides, Spencer Peterson, who I'm sure many people have met if they've done a MotoVermont tour, is an excellent, excellent rider. And every once in a while, he'll lead a tour on an XT250. And when we're doing the morning meeting and we're, everyone's on these KTM 500s that with, $5,000 worth of suspension and exhaust work, and Spencer jumps on that stock XT250, they kind of roll their eyes and are like, this is who we're following. And good luck keeping up with them, because they are very humbled by the end of the day, because it's extremely difficult to keep up with Spencer on an XT250, no matter what you're riding. So it's certainly not the bike, it's the rider typically.
You started off riding, you had this passion for travel. Now you've combined the passion with the business. Has your relationship to motorcycling changed over the years?
So yeah, it's a really good question. Has motorcycling changed for me since I've made it my business? And really there's kind of two separate modes of motorcycling. For me, I've got my motorcycling with customers or on a tour where my focus is on them and their enjoyment and what they want to do and what they want to see. So of course my focus is on them, but still riding a motorcycle, so it's still fun. And then there's my personal riding where I can just go with my friends or go on rides both by myself, and I do what I want. I see what I want. I stop where I want. So that has not changed at all. I still love riding motorcycles either by myself or with customers. I love showing customers cool places that it also kind of, it reminds me how cool and beautiful some of these places are. I'll pull into over a rise and see a beautiful view that I've seen 1,000 times, but that customer stops and is like, oh my God, that's the most picturesque view I've ever seen. I said, oh yeah, that is really, really beautiful. I kind of forgot. So it brings me back to earth sometimes.
When you're riding personally, do you ride the same motorcycle that you ride with the tours, or something different?
Typically with tours, I'm riding one of our company bikes. So either a Tenere or a KLX 300 are usually my go-tos.
And how many motorcycles do you own personally?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question. So I have two like semi-modern motorcycles that I ride regularly. And then I probably have about 3 registered like antique motorcycles that I ride semi-regularly, so a couple times a season. And then I've got a few more that, are in various states of disrepair or unregistered or sitting in a friend's garage somewhere.
There's definitely a theme across all these episodes.
I'm no different.
Is there any motorcycle that you're excited about that's coming onto the market or has just recently come onto the market?
I mean, there's a lot coming out right now. I think those Cove motorcycles, those 450 rallies look really cool. I'm really interested in the electrification of motorcycles. I think that's a really just an interesting step that the industry has to take. And I'm really proud of like the company Zero for sticking with it and getting a nice dealer network and putting out cool motorcycles that are electrified. I wish some of the other companies that have kind of come and gone would stick it out a little bit. I'd love to see some more electrification from some of the major manufacturers as well. Of course, range is that issue, but I like the way that's going. It's really cool and interesting.
Have you had any electric motorcycles on your tours?
Yes, we have actually. We've had a few Zeros. We've had the FX on a couple of trainings, which was really interesting because the trainings are so heavily dealing with using the controls to help you out. So of course the clutch is a major control that can really help you in off-road riding. So when you take that clutch away, it is just a different type of teaching and learning to ride off-road, and that's been really interesting, and we can do it. I mean, those things are very capable. They do have a tremendous amount of power, but you can harness that power and ride them off-road, pretty deliberately and pretty well.
It's going to be so interesting to see what happens in the next 5 years. I'm excited to see it, the technology evolve. I have mixed feeling about electric motorcycles, but I do think that it's a contingent that we can't ignore.
Yeah. I'm just curious, what are your mixed feelings? Like what do you see as negatives? Because I see some negatives as well.
Yeah. Well, obviously the range right now, batteries in general, just the money hasn't been put into the technology, and that is
Hmm.
absolutely changing. I guess the positive for being in the woods on electric is that it's quiet. So if you are in some of these areas that are a little bit more populated, some of the
Hmm.
complaints is the noise. You're going to hear a two-stroke or four-stroke. It's just people complain about that if they're non-riders. We love
Sure.
that. Love that sound.
Yeah.
If I hear that sound in the background, I'm like, yeah, go for it. So I do understand that electric could really fill that need of quieting everything down. I think
Hmm.
that I would hate to see gas powered things just completely go by the wayside. And it's not necessarily a compelling argument, but there is, our electrical grid in the USA is not as robust as people would think that it is. It's actually quite antiquated. So I have concerns about how much electric vehicles are going to put a strain on the system, because
Hmm.
it's going to take a monumental effort to make the grid up to par to be able to handle everything. So that's kind
Sure.
of my
Sure.
concern about it, mostly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good
How about you?
points. Good points. Um, it's an odd concern, but what I get a little weirded out about when I'm riding on an electric motorcycle is that they have no noise, so nobody can really
Mm.
hear them coming, including animals, which is a good thing, and you get to see a lot more
Oh,
wildlife. But can be a little
yeah.
bit scary when you're coming up on a deer or an animal. They have no idea you're there until you're right there. So, and then of course traffic as well. They just can't hear you coming. So
Hmm.
personally, that's kind of freaks me out when I'm riding an electric bike,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of advantages as well.
I hadn't even thought about the animal contingent. That's a really good point. For sure on the road, we are already invisible. So adding to that is like,
Yeah,
it's a little concerning. So
it
those are
is.
some great points. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience? Is there anything that we didn't cover?
Gosh, I mean, I just think that I'd like to, when it comes to I think training is really important. I'm not trying to promote our
Mm.
trainings, but I believe
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
training is really important, not only to develop skill set, but I touched quickly on first aid. And feel like all motorcyclists should go out there and take a wilderness first aid course of some type, because it's really great to have that knowledge, not only for ourselves and our friends on the trail, but a lot of times we ride in sparsely populated areas. And just on
Hmm.
our tours, we've come across, hikers, bicyclists, car accidents, things that we've been able to lend a helping hand in getting people better or out of there, extracting people from those situations. That I wish that every motorcyclist and every trail user would have those kind of basic first aid skills. And just like
Hmm.
you pack, extra tubes and wrenches, you should be packing wraps and bandages and blood clotting agents if you know how to use them. So not to get morbid or anything, but just
No,
something
no,
that,
no. Yeah.
also I feel like motorcyclists should really, really, really educate themselves about.
I'm really glad you bring this up because nobody wants to go there, right? Like we know that there's inherent risks with the sport that we do. Nobody ever
Absolutely.
wants to talk about what happens when things go sideways, and it can be awful, awful. If anybody's witnessed an accident, whether it's led to broken bones or even worse, death, like we need to acknowledge that this actually happens. And I think that the wilderness training is a really interesting thing because I have ridden sweep a lot on some of these dual sport rides, and I don't carry a medical kit. And I had gone on a ride, and it's one of these things like probably nobody wants me to talk about, but a woman went off a 30
Hmm.
foot embankment, and she was very
Wow.
lucky to survive. Yeah, it was
Hmm.
horrific. And we were close enough to civilization that help was able to come up, and they were able to get up onto this road to get to her. But where the circumstances just a little bit different, where it was maybe single track versus like a fire road of some sort, it would have been really it could have been catastrophic. So
Hmm.
you bring a really great point up with that. And the other thing that I think is important about training, and I'm all for it because I would say my off-road skills are mediocre. I think I have a lot to learn. Is that, when you're saying that the people that are coming to your class or your trainings that are between like 40, 45, a lot of people didn't ride dirt growing up. And it's a completely different beast. And I have found personally that among my friends who have decided to pursue this later in life, that there are a lot of accidents that happen because of lack of skill and broken bones, which become harder to, heal and mend as we get older. So
Yeah.
I think that's something else to talk about with the trainings that's important.
Yeah, it is. It is. Skill development, of course, is huge, and then
Mhm.
just knowing your limitations. Not getting
Yeah.
ahead of yourself. I mean, it's so much fun when you're out there ripping down a road that it's hard to judge your fun according to the risk there, right? Fun versus risk, or
Mhm.
risk versus reward, can be difficult to decipher.
Yeah. And the trainings are really good at assessing like where your skill level is at and also learning the tricks because there's just stuff that maybe you've never seen or you've never experienced. And you're like, oh, that's how you go over a log. Like I didn't,
Yeah, we get a
I didn't
lot of
know you
that.
needed to do that.
Uh-huh.
Instead of trying to find the way to ride all the way around the tree,
Which is sometimes
bushwhack through.
impossible.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I'm very happy you brought up the whole training portion of it. I think it's huge. And one of the things that attracted me to your tour, which I have not yet done and I'm looking forward to doing in the future, is that you offered the trainings. And I think that putting emphasis on that is just great. It's great.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
can never learn enough. Even doesn't matter how many years you've been riding.
With everything. Yeah.
And then it takes practice. I mean, the other thing is I get to go to one of these training, one of these events. If you're doing it once a year and then not immediately putting those skills into practice afterwards, it becomes harder as we get older to remember what to do the following year.
For sure.
So after we're talking about all these trainings and, practicing the skills, what,
Hmm.
if you're willing to talk about it, what have been some like terrible things that have happened or you've witnessed?
Oh boy. Well, we're really lucky. We have not had a whole lot of terrible incidents, and thank goodness we've never had a fatality on any of our tours, and really only a handful of hospitalizations, a couple of quick hospital, more than a handful of like quick hospital visits, like, oh yeah, that, finger is dislocated, or yeah, we're going to put a stitch in that. Because like we said, this is an inherently dangerous sport, and we do a
Yeah.
lot of motorcycle tours. We've been at it for 13 years now. So yeah, we've had some incidents. A major incident that we had once that we've learned a lot from. We were doing a tour in a very remote region of Canada, up north of Montreal. A lot of people don't know that north of Montreal it turned into a very sparsely populated area with very few villages. A lot of those villages are First Nation villages, so like kind of like native population. So super small, super remote. And we were doing a tour up there. It was a multi-day tour. I wasn't on this one, but this is, I'm telling you, third party here.
Okay.
But we had a guy, a rider that was on a two-track trail, and he fell. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was kind of actually, there's no real obstacle there. We were curious, in hindsight, we don't know exactly what happened, but he fell and he got back up, and he was complaining about some, kind of pain from his rib area. So we
Ooh.
had the thought that, maybe it was a bruised rib, maybe it was a cracked rib. Just so happened this rider was a surgeon at a very prestigious medical center. His buddy with him was also a surgeon at that same medical center. So they, assessed the situation themselves, and they kind of deduced that it was just a bruised rib. The guy could breathe. It was painful, but he could breathe. And they wanted to keep going to the lodge that night. The lodge we were going to was extremely remote, so remote that you actually had to take a boat across a lake to get to that lodge with the motorcycles.
Wow.
Motorcycles went on the boat and over to this lodge. It
Wow.
was very, very, very cool. So we get up there. We had to actually transport him. We had an ATV with us. So we transported him up there by ATV. These are all really rough kind of trails for any vehicle, even a pickup truck. Middle of the night, the head guide on that tour got a knock on the door, and this rider was now seeing blood in his urine, which is a really bad
no.
sign. So, 4:00 in the morning, we awoke the innkeeper. He got his utility vehicle ready, and we basically had to transport this guy down this trail to a very rough dirt road, get an ambulance to then transport him to a little outpatient center. They had no x-ray machine there, so they had to transport him even further to a larger kind of First Nation medical center. And there they discovered that every single one of his ribs was broken. His kidney and his liver were both lacerated. And from there, they
Oh,
had
wow.
to med jet him to Boston, where he went to emergency surgery and everything was good. He was, after that, they were able to,
Yeah.
he was totally to total full recovery. But that's one of those things where, we
Yeah.
now, it is our policy that if somebody takes a fall and is showing some sort of injury, we have them checked out
Hmm.
no matter what. That is not as a non-negotiable. But we took,
Okay.
we took someone's word on this. Some two very
Yeah.
educated people, and that was our mistake, and we won't let that happen again. So there you go.
Hmm.
That's kind of our worst case scenario as far as injuries go. So far has been our worst
Yeah.
case scenario as far as injuries go.
Wow, that's something. And the irony is like sometimes some of the worst accidents happen in the parking lot. I mean, where you don't know. You don't know.
Yeah, you
But
never know.
but it's good that you guys are mitigating all possible surprises, situations by putting these protocols into effect. It's great and it's important.
Yeah, we have to. We have to, protect ourselves and protect our customers to the best of our
Yeah.
ability.
The nice thing about these tours as we sort of wrap up is that it allows people to go into an environment and have all this stuff taken care of that, you wouldn't necessarily think ahead of. Like I said, I don't carry a medical kit. You're really making me, feel like I really need to rethink that. But sometimes it's just enough to try to pack your gear and figure out, like, I don't know,
Hmm.
should I bring these boots or these boots, or should I bring both? How much room do I have? But
Yeah.
then to have your meals taken care of, your lodging dealt with, medical attention, your stuff being carried. So it's not a problem if you bring too much or not enough. I'm sure you guys have extra gear. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time on your family trip to talk with us about your business and about riding. It was great. I learned a lot about taking a tour, and I very much look forward to going to MotoVermont one of these days. And to everybody else, as you know, ride smart. Ciao.